I am, not an AI exceptionalist. I'm an individual and human exceptionalist. I think new technologies have to be developed in a way that aligns with American values. Things like self-government, free speech, having a healthy labor force, federalism and the rights of states, and the creation and maintenance of strong families. You want technologies that enhance our way of life, not supplant our way of life. And we will never, ever be able to credibly shed ourselves of our responsibility to think for ourselves. We cannot turn it all over to machines and think it's all going to work out great in the end. And so as you look at this, this is just a fundamentally true observation. Right now, we're being told that you have a handful of companies that are just going to do all this and somehow that's going to make things good. And this is just true. The incentives of big tech are not the same as what's in the interest of the people and the public. The incentives of big tech is to maximize profits off of this. They're spending a lot of money on creating data centers, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. They're doing that, and the whole reason they're doing it is to get a return on the investment. So they're going to guide the technologies in a direction that is going to be the most likely to monetize returns. So if there's ways technologies to be more beneficial for humanity, but it would lose money, versus some that could be destructive but will make them a lot of money, they are going to choose the money. And honestly, they're duty bound as public companies, which most of them are, to maximize shareholder value. So the incentives are not aligned. And I bring this up because, there was a proposal in the U.S. Congress to impose a 10-year moratorium on any state regulation of artificial intelligence. And you'll hear from Megan in a minute about some of the things we're looking to do to protect children. But that is basically saying, let the handful of tech companies, let them drive the train, and we're just along for the ride. And that was stripped out of a bill, 99-1 in the U.S. Senate. They're talking about jamming it into the defense authorization bill. I got to think a lot of these congressmen and senators are very concerned about that because it'd be an incredibly unpopular thing to be able to do. So it's basically an AI amnesty for some of the wealthiest companies in the history of humanity, the wealthiest companies in the history of humanity. And that would basically take away the rights of states to be able to do things to protect the people that are here, because there's so many implications for what they're doing with respect to artificial intelligence that states like Florida not only have a right, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're creating sufficient guardrails so that this stuff isn't hurting our kids, our families, our businesses, and our senior citizens. And this is why doing that moratorium, I've been very public about it, it's just a total non-starter. And they'll tell you, well, California is going to do all crazy stuff. Okay, so yeah, they do crazy stuff all the time. So you're going to strip Florida of a right to be able to do? How does that make any sense in terms of what they're doing? So that's the first thing. The incentives are just not aligned. Second, you'll see, well, you need a moratorium, you need that. We've got to beat China in AI. And, on some of it, like I'm a China hawk, like I would do, a lot to be able to blunt China's rise, both economically and militarily and politically. All these things I think are important. But if you were choosing a handful of companies to lead the charge against China, the big tech companies would be the last ones you want to do. They're not trying to beat China. They want to sell to China. Are you kidding me? All these companies have made a lot of money in China, and many of them want to make a lot more money in China. So that doesn't wash because their behavior and their incentives are not to somehow beat China. Now, it'd be one thing if you're saying we're gonna underwrite DoD research in our military to be able to stay ahead on weapons and all those things. Great. I'm all for that. I think that would be something good. But just saying that not having states be involved, let the companies do kind of what they want, that's going to lead to beating China, that's just not true. It's in their interest to do business with China. It's their interest to sell things and applications to China. So when you hear that, it reminds me of COVID, honestly, where you just hear these phrases that are just thrown out. Oh, this, that, the other thing. So I don't know that there's a lot of sense behind that. If you're talking about like a Manhattan Project, about how we're going to be militarily superior to China, fine. Tell us how you're doing that. Tell us how that's going to be done within the context. But creating, some type of chat bot that's going to do, and you're going to hear from Megan, that's not beating China. It's interesting. TikTok, it's a Chinese app, right? TikTok in China is much different than it is in the United States. The negatives that we see with kids within the United States, China doesn't allow that to happen to their kids. So China's not in a race to do AI slop. That is not what they're trying to do. So yeah, let's talk about how can you do more technological innovation for defense, for medical research, for all those things. Great. But so much of this is the consumer facing, and that's really how they're going to try to monetize it, and that's what's going to end up having the biggest impact on society. You also have a situation of you're essentially arguing both at the federal level, and some of the other states have tried to do things to subsidize the growth of artificial intelligence with special privileges, because a 10-year moratorium, when you have different types of tax, some people, these data centers I'll talk about, they build it, and so, there's people that got to build it, so that's an economic impact. But once it's built, it's like 10 jobs, and they usually bring in foreigners for those jobs. And so it's like, from a community perspective, the impact at that point is very, very little. And so, you have this situation where some people are like, well, but they're big landowners, they're going to pay, a lot of tax, but then they give them property tax abatement, so they don't pay that either. So the point is you've seen a lot of unnatural policy, seeking and achieving unnatural policy. It's not purely market driven. And so the question is, why would you want to put thumb on the scale here or there? First of all, that's typically not how you would do when you're talking about market economics. But in particular with artificial intelligence, one of the selling points of people who really are gung-ho about artificial intelligence is that it's going to cause a lot of job losses in the economy, because they're going to be able to automate more and more things, and so you're not going to see as many people get hired out of college. You'll see if we're in a recession, you're not going to see any of those jobs come back. And I'm just thinking to myself, why would we want to subsidize that outcome that is going to potentially cause harm? And here's the thing, new technologies sometimes displace jobs, but sometimes they can open up other opportunities. And I think that that's true, but I think the interesting thing with AI is some of the proponents, they're almost gleeful that you're going to have fewer people employed. They're not even promising that there's all of a sudden going to be more. So again, I think that there's technology that can enhance a worker's productivity, enhance a business's efficiency in ways that would be valuable, but I also think that there are some who view it as a way to simply be able to have less people employed. And so you would not want to put your thumb on the scale to be able to do that. The other thing is there's nothing new under the sun. We see different technologies emerge, but underlying all this is the same insight the founding fathers had when they founded the United States of America. Human nature is flawed. And so when they were creating a government, they had to articulate the core principles that our rights come from God, not from the government, that the purpose of government is to protect those pre-existing rights, that we have a rule of law, not the whim of individuals, and that we have limited government and that power is divided between the states and the federal government, with the states having powers reserved that are not specifically enumerated. But the reason why they went and created the structure that they did to try to get those values enshrined in a constitution is because they wanted to make sure that the government operated with a proper understanding of human nature. You would never create government power and just hope people do the right thing. They expected people to not do the right thing. They wanted to channel it in a way so that people had the incentives to be able to govern in a way, in a very complicated system where there's conflicting checks and balances, that would ultimately be able to lead to at least not terrible outcomes, because they were very suspicious of government. But they were not just going to say that, yes, we'll just elect a bunch of angels into the government and everything's going to be hunky-dory. No. They said if men were angels, you wouldn't need a government. If angels govern the rest of the people, then you wouldn't need any restraint on government or internal control. But that's not the world we live in. So they understood, human nature being what it was, people that accumulate power, that there would be temptations and there would be abuse of the power. So that's why they have checks and balances. That's why the executive has certain powers. That's why the legislature, Congress has certain powers, the judiciary, all these different things. So when you're talking about AI, these are massive companies. In some respects, they have more power than governments in certain avenues of this. But there is nothing new about human nature. The founders would not have conceived of any of these social media, chat bots, none of that. But at the same time, human nature being what it is, you're going to have the same dangers of power being abused. It's just in a different sphere. It's just got different wrapping paper, but the underlying principles are the same. And so if you think about when you type in something on one of these LLMs, these learned language models, you ask them a question. First of all, a lot of the answers are inaccurate. Let's just be clear. A lot of the quotes can be fabricated, and you wonder how that's happening. And I told a story. I'm a Tampa Bay Bucks fan, right? We live in Tallahassee, so we're out of the Tampa Bay market, and it was Bucks Patriots a few weeks ago, and I'm like, oh man, the whole family's ready, right? And I go, and it was the national game. It was Jim Nantz, Romo were doing it. But then they had the Jaguars and Texans on in Tallahassee. So I go to Grok and I say, hey, how do I watch it? They're like, it's on your local CBS. And I'm like, no, it's not. And they're like, oh, well, you got to sign up for Paramount Plus. So I signed up for Paramount Plus. NFL Sunday. Jaguars and Texans on Paramount Plus. No access to the Bucks game. And I'm just thinking to myself, and then, people are like, oh, no, Governor, you got to do this way. Well, okay, but this, so it was wrong, right? And there's some kind of that was, I think, an innocent mistake. But whatever the data that these machines are synthesizing, if the data is garbage, their answers are going to be garbage. Garbage in, garbage out. So you are going to have a situation where you have a handful of these LLMs. Whoever controls the data, if you tweak the algorithm a little bit, you tweak some of the things in there, you're going to be able to generate all kinds of things that are not accurate. And that are not good. People will, if given the power to effectuate that, they will do it to push an agenda. That will happen. There's no way it couldn't happen without safeguards. And I think back, when Google first came out, because remember, it was like Yahoo was the best search engine. I think I was in college still. And this Google comes out, and it's like very, very, just a little thing there, and it's like, oh, and you do it, and it comes. And man, if I was doing something, it would come out. Now, somewhere along the line, if you type, we're trying to research something of a conservative bent, the results are like 5 pages about why that's wrong, right? Before you get what you're actually looking for. They change things, right? They were doing things to be able to produce certain results. That will happen with this. So there's nothing new under the sun. You have huge potential for abuse when you're talking about it. And they just did an analysis on some of these legal briefs and legal decisions. And these lawyers are now submitting briefs that have fictitious cases cited and fictitious quotes. And so it raises, are we just going to be in a totally alternate universe where the AI stuff they're spitting out is not truthful, it's not accurate, but somehow that's what everybody is behaving around. And people will say, oh, well, just don't use AI if we do it. Let me tell you, as governor, I don't text, I don't email, I don't have stuff. So it's like just living my life. Like if I need to get my kids something, I need to buy them something. Like, what's your email address? Well, I don't have an email. We're going to text you a confirmation. I don't receive text messages. So these things, you really can't operate, and look, I'm governor, so we can figure it out, right? But I mean, if I wasn't, I would not be able to operate, without having some type of relationship with a lot of these companies. That's just the way society is when you're conducting normal business. So as AI becomes more pervasive, it's not like you're just going to be able to say, oh, I'm not. It's going to impact you. And there are obvious dangers that we need. So, I really fear that if this is not addressed in an intelligent and proper way, it could set off an age of darkness and deceit. Some will say that it's going to lead to, curing cancer and all that. And I hope so. I think that would be great. But human nature is what it is. There's going to be huge temptations to take this in a very bad direction. And so instead of having truth at your fingertips, you're basically having narratives shoved down your throat. You're having agendas that are being put out there by people who are going to be very, very powerful if they're sitting at the helm of these companies. And so finally, it's like, okay, well, how does this affect me as a Floridian or whatnot? And you're going to hear from Megan Garcia in a minute, but Megan's teenage son was doing chatbot, and I guess you can have like friends that are chatbots, and this one was doing things that were not appropriate in terms of with the son, and then eventually I think became like a Game of Thrones character and coached her son into committing suicide, and her son committed suicide. And you just think to yourself, what the hell is going on with this country that this would be something that we would be allowing to happen? And so you're seeing more and more of this. I think it's very, very dangerous. Again, going back to the financial incentives, these companies, most of them are sell advertising, right? I mean, so they need eyeballs. Well, you get these kids addicted on some of this stuff. You're going to have guaranteed eyeballs. You're going to be able to monetize that. So there's huge, huge problems that we see. So that brings us here today to be able to announce, and I've mentioned this before, but we're going to be proposing, and we're going to work with the legislature to establish an artificial intelligence Bill of Rights for individual Floridians in our state. This will be very far-reaching with consumer protections. It will do things like fortify some of the protections we have in place for things like deep fakes and use of explicit material, particularly those that depict minors. We are also going to make sure that your data is protected. We're not going to allow any state or local government agency to utilize Chinese-created AI tools when they're doing data here in the state of Florida. And I know that there's some senators who are working on that. We're going to protect consumers and individuals from having your name, image, and likeness weaponized in a way that can do you harm. And we have a legal framework in place already with some of our statutes about fraud and different things with parts of political ads. But they can take you now, and they can put words in your mouth in ways that may be detrimental to you. I mean, certainly you're going to see it in politics a lot, because they're going to put commercials with people saying things that they never actually said. And the one thing you learn about in politics is when you see these ads, if someone runs an ad and says, John Smith is a dirtbag and this and this and that, I'm not saying it doesn't have an effect, but I think voters just look at that like typical. But if you have an ad in this guy's own words where he's proving to you that he's a dirt, then that really does matter, right? Because people see that and like, oh, I don't like that guy, right? Why did he say that? Why does he believe that? So there's definitely going to be, an incentive to want to do that. But even in business and other things, there's going to be huge possibilities, of abuse. We had fun with it. I don't know how to do it, but we had got it done. So my son is in second grade, huge Florida State fan, like the most loyal you will ever find. Hates other teams, does not like the Gators, and I told him. They had the Florida State game, and I filmed him, and we'll put up his prediction sometimes. And I was planning on doing it, so I'm filming him, and I'm like, "Give me your prediction about it." And he just starts lacing into the Gators, and I'm like, dude, I can't put you on there as my son bashing a Florida school. I just can't do it. Like, you know, it's like, it's fine you have your allegiance, but you can't be. So I didn't put it on. But we ended up, so we were just having fun with them. And I don't even know how it happened because I don't know how to work it. But, you know, you can do a picture of somebody and then tell, like, the AI to make, like, a, so they have a picture of Mason in a Florida State jersey, kind of like that. And then they do it, and it creates this video where he's like that. He rips off the Florida State jersey. You see a University of Florida jersey, and then my son is doing the Gator chomp, saying it's great to be a Florida Gator. He was very upset when he saw that. He probably would sue if that ever got public. And he was just like, and he does not like artificial intelligence as a result of that. But I mean, like, and it's kind of, that's slop, right? It's having fun or whatever. But, like, you know, honestly, it looked real. It looked real. So everyone, I think, is going to be in a situation where people are going to be able to manipulate this stuff. And I know that there's some senators that are working on that as well. We also want to protect families. We want to protect parents. And we want to protect minors. We will provide more parental rights in this bill. We're going to ensure parents can access conversations their child has with one of these LLM chatbots. Parent will be able to set parameters for when the child can access any of these platforms, and there'll be notifications for parents required if the child exhibits concerning behavior. You know, there's sometimes, so like we've got kindergarten, second, third grade, and sometimes, you know, we did a social media bill for minors and help parents with that. And basically we said if you're 14 or under, the company can't issue an account. If you're 15 or 16, the parent has to consent. Above that, you know, it's hard for us to do at that point. And some people are like, well, the parent should just do. If a 10-year-old is doing it, it's the parent's fault. Well, I'll tell you, it's hard to police as a parent. I mean, they're in school, they do different things. Other kids may do it. You know, you really do need to have kind of an environment and a structure so that the parent control is really protected and elevated. To just say parents are supposed to figure it out. With these technologies, the way they develop, and these kids know, they know how to swipe, they know how to do this at a very young age. So I think that that's really important.